Did you know that as a U.S. citizen, you can legally have 2 U.S. passports? In this video, we're going to dive into something a lot of travelers may not know: how Americans can legally have 2 U.S. passport books. Yes, that's right, not just one, but 2. If you're someone who frequently travels or encounters visa restrictions, this could be a game changer for you. So let's break it all down: why you might need 2 passport books and how you can apply for one. First things first, let's clear up what we're talking about here. We're not discussing dual citizenship or holding 2 passports from different countries. We're talking about having 2 U.S. passports, also known as passport books, both issued by the U.S. Department of State. And in this video, we're going to talk about why that could be really useful for you and how to actually execute on this and get a second copy of your U.S. passport. There are a few common reasons why the U.S. government may issue you a second passport book. Let's go over the most important ones. One big reason is that some countries won't let you in if your passport has stamps from certain other countries. For example, the most famous example is if you have an Israeli visa or an entry-exit stamp from Israel, some countries in the Middle East may deny you entry and vice versa. Having a second passport book lets you keep those conflicting stamps separate so that you can travel more freely. If you're someone who travels often, maybe you work for a multinational company or an international airline, you might need multiple visas at the same time. Having a second passport book allows you to send one for visa processing while still being able to travel with the other. Another common situation is needing to travel urgently while your passport is tied up in a visa application. If a foreign country delays your visa process and you can't afford to wait, a second passport book can be a life changer. Okay? This is something also on our podcast, the MyLatinLife Podcast, we talk about with our guests that are trying to go to every country in the world. There are a lot of countries where you need to mail in your passport to get the visa. Pretty much every country in Africa operates like this. And even Spain for Latin Americans operates like this as well, where you got to give the Spanish embassy your passport for a couple weeks. So it's more common than you think to actually have to hand over your passport in order to get a visa affixed to it. And then the problem becomes, well, while that foreign government has my passport, obviously I can't really travel. I don't have my travel document. And that's where the second passport book really comes in handy. There are less common situations as well, such as needing a special validation to travel to a restricted country, or preventing the cancellation of a valid passport with a valid visa, or needing extra space for endorsements. Okay? For example, if you get if you have a visa in your passport book, but then you get a new passport, that visa might no longer be active because it's attached to an old passport number, right? Because your passport number changes when you get a new passport book. So that's something to consider as well. Okay? So there are some reasons, but now let's get into how you can apply for a second U.S. passport. The process is pretty straightforward, but you do need to meet a few requirements, and also there's a few nuances here. So let's look at what you need to do. The form you'll fill out depends on whether you can submit your most recent passport book or you need to hold on to it. In most cases, you'll use Form DS-82 if you have your full validity 10-year passport book and meet other requirements to renew it. But if you can't submit your current passport, maybe because it's being processed for a visa, then you'll need to apply in person using Form DS-11 at a passport acceptance facility or passport agency. When applying for a second passport book, you'll need to submit a signed statement explaining why you need it. This is crucial, and the U.S. Department of State will review your reasons, so make sure to clearly explain why a second passport is necessary for your travel needs. You'll also need to provide a new passport photo along with your application. This has to meet specific requirements, so make sure to check the passport photo guidelines provided by the U.S. State Department. Now, just like with your first passport, there are fees involved. As of right now, the fee for a passport book is around $130, but the exact amount depends on your application and just how fast you need it. If you need expedited service, that's going to cost extra, and there are ways to speed it up. If you're traveling in more than 3 weeks, you can mail your application and supporting documents, but if your travel is less than 3 weeks away, you'll need to make an appointment at a passport agency or center to get it processed faster. Once you've submitted your application, you can track its status online. It usually takes about 2 weeks for your application status to be marked as in process, so make sure to keep an eye on it, especially if you need the passport for upcoming travel. One more thing to note, a second passport book is typically only valid for 4 years, not the standard 10 years. So make sure you stay on top of renewals. And you're probably wondering, so I'll have one passport that's valid for 10 years, one for 4 years. Which one should I show as I travel the world? And I have heard stories of people getting detained at borders around the world when they go, hey, why is this only valid for 4 years? Because it is pretty uncommon. Like, not a lot of people are using these documents. So that's something to consider as well, is that border agents might spot the difference. Not that it's a bad thing or whatever, but just something to keep in mind. Before we wrap up, let's go over a couple of final tips. Remember, this process is only for passport books. You can't get a second passport card. Also, if you need more visa pages, you can request a larger passport book at no extra cost when filling out your form. So there you have it, everything you need to know about getting a second U.S. passport book. If you're a frequent traveler or need to manage visas for different countries, this could be an essential tool for you. Just make sure you meet the requirements and follow the steps to get that second book in your hands. If you're curious about the different ways to apply for this document, if it's better to go for a facility or do the mail-in, book a call with MyLatinLife. We can explain you the optimal strategy where the U.S. government's not going to ask too many questions. And if you're watching this video because you're doing, some visa stuff, some border stuff, MyLatinLife, we're pretty well versed on these concepts, especially in Latin America, if you know what I'm talking about. So book a link in the description if you want to talk to us and help you work on your internationalization plan. If you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more tips on travel, visas, and global mobility. And if you have questions or comments or funny stories, drop them in the comments below. Would love to hear about your experience and answer any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching and safe travels.